Welcome back to Podcast Recovery. We are your hosts, David O.
And Eric V.
Today we are joined by... Oh my god, I totally brain farted on Jeff?
Oh my god. We just went through this, David.
I'm sorry.
Hi, it's Jeff, guys.
Jeff. Yeah, I was like, is it Jeff? Yeah. Yes, Jeff. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
I'm doing well, man. Just got back from a day in D.C. in the hot, sweaty sun, so a little tired, but I'm doing good, man. Eric?
Excellent.
Yeah, man. So when were you first introduced to recovery?
Well, I was first introduced to recovery in October of 2016. I had an incident where I got arrested after a binge that I was on. My drug of choice was crack cocaine. My addiction lasted for 30 years. I'm 52 years old, basically my entire adult life. And I kind of knew the gig was up when I got arrested. I made the media, made the news because of the job I had and who I worked for, which was an elected official. And I knew things had to change, and so I accepted the fact that I would have to go to recovery. I didn't know treatment. I didn't know what it meant, didn't know what it would look like, but I knew it was about to happen.
Wow. All right. And how long have you been clean?
Just 2 years and 7 months.
All right.
Yeah, right at just over 2.5 years.
That's awesome, man. All right. Well, with all that out of the way, we're going to turn it over to you to share your story with us, so take it away.
Sure. Well, my name is Jeff, and I do share my last name. It's Jeff Breedlove, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. My drug of choice was crack cocaine. I began my active addiction basically when I was 20 years old. I'm 52 now. The incident occurred when I got arrested to bring me into recovery when I was 50. So roughly 30 years, I'm in and out of different phases of my active addiction. When it began, I used a lot of product a little bit of time. And for years, I was much like a functioning alcoholic. I was a functioning addict. And I always remind people at this point, especially young people, that you really have to understand back in the late 80s and early 90s when this was getting started, literally, we didn't have smartphones. We didn't. Society, we didn't. And so society was very different, and it was understood. You could be away for hours at a time, and there was no instant messaging or tracking or anything like that. So it was easier, much easier for me to be away for a few hours at a time and no one be suspicious. And so I did that, and it worked really well for me in active addiction until about 1998 when I was out and put some charges on a credit card belonging to the Georgia Republican Party.
Wow.
The person at the I was insane. I was sick. I mean, it's an illness, right? And the person at the hotel got a little suspicious about what may or may not be going on in the hotel room, and they called the Republican Party. And when I got to work, I was questioned and let go. And that was the first time that I lost a job due to this, and that's when my wife became aware of this and my family. And that led to a period of time from 1998 to 2002 where I would lose jobs, get a job, lose a job, get a job. And that's fascinating to me because it goes to the whole stigma around alcoholism and addiction. People, I would get, outed, busted, some incident would occur, but they didn't want me arrested. They didn't want any attention to it. They were victims, of course, these employers, but they were also enablers, and they just wanted me to kind of leave and go away. And I got very arrogant and cocky because I'd be like, I can do what I want to do, and I'm going to get another job. So I'm selfish and very, very sick. And my wife stayed with me, and she followed me to about 8 states all over the country, just getting a job, losing a job. And that went on until, like I said, 2002. And then something happened to me in terms of my addiction. First of all, we moved home from California where we wound up. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And we come home to Atlanta. My mother-in-law got very ill, and my wife wanted to be her primary, caregiver to help my father-in-law. And for 6 years, almost 7 years, I was dry. And we thought, hey, this is over, because I didn't use. I never drank. It was just only my one drug of choice, and I thought I had this licked, and I did have it licked until I didn't have it licked.
Yeah.
And the dangerous part, the most dangerous part of my active addiction was the last part, roughly the last 10 or 11 years. And that's when I would use a lot of product a little bit. I would go on binges. I didn't want to do it anymore. I had decided it wasn't healthy, but what would happen? I'd go out for 24 or 48 hours. I'd run up debts. I'd start pawning, hawking the car, trading the phone. I stole one time $77 from my son. And I guess I should say it just for clarity. At some point in there, we actually adopted our son, and so now we're a family of 3 when this is all going on. And I was just out of control. I had guns put in my face, just running up debts I could not cover. And that lasted about a decade. And I would try, and I'd last like 10 or 11 months white-knuckling it because I didn't want to do it. Then I would just go explode. And my parents would bail me out. My wife would bail me out. And I would never get treatment. I had at this point a couple of friends that were desperately trying to talk me into going into treatment. And I was so sick and so arrogant that I would say things like this. I would say, well, if somebody sees me in treatment, that might hurt my political career. Now, I never once said, hey, if somebody sees me in a hotel doing crack cocaine, that might hurt my political career. Because I was sick. I didn't rationalize it, and so I wanted to not do it, but then again, I didn't want to not do it. And so fast forward to October 2016, I am hosting 4 they're not all elected officials, but 4 government officials from 4 different countries for a program for the State Department. And my son is playing high school football, and everything's going great. I've got a great job with an elected official who's like a sister to me. Her name is Nancy Jester. She's a county commissioner in DeKalb County, Georgia, a large metro Atlanta county. And Nancy's given me this second chance to come back. And, I have all these blessings in life. But in October, on a Friday, when my son's got a football game, when I'm supposed to, I go to work. I decide after work at about 10 o'clock, it's just time to go on a binge. And I wish I could explain it. I wish any of us, in active addiction could explain it, but I just did what I did. And nobody saw me until Sunday. But long story short, I asked a friend to help bail me out, and this friend did not bail me out the way I wanted him to at the time. He called the DeKalb County Police Department.
Oh, wow.
So they come knock on the hotel room door where I am, because I, of course, have told my friend exactly where I am. And they realize that they have now in their custody the chief of staff to a county commissioner, and not just any county commissioner, but the most pro-law enforcement county commissioner in the county, really working on their budget. And
wow.
So they don't take you straight. Yeah, they don't take you straight to jail. They take you to police headquarters. Now, I go to police headquarters, and I'm there for roughly 8 hours. And the decision was made that they were going to arrest me. And they did not arrest me for a drug charge because I had no paraphernalia on me or anything like that. They arrested me for lying to the police. And in Georgia, they can do a felony or a misdemeanor, and they slapped a felony. So I'm facing a felony lying to the police charge. And all if I go to jail. The sad part about this, looking back on it, 2 things happen now that I'm in recovery that I just love so much to tell. So when the detectives come tell me that I'm going to be arrested, I, of course, demand to see a supervisor. Well, this was not their first rodeo, of course. And the supervisor steps around the corner, and he's a very large detective. Yeah. And he gets in my face, and he says some pretty direct adult words to me. And then he just stops, and he looks at me, and he hugs me, and he said, by the way, we're going to go save your life.
Nice.
Well, I'm not appreciating that at the time.
No, of course not.
No, but looking back on it, that detective and the people who did what they did, and I know some of the stuff that happened, when the decision was made to save my life, to arrest me, that helped save my life. I needed that to happen. So off I go. And here's the second thing. As in my position, I had done a large number of ride-alongs with all the divisions of our police department. And the young man that drove me from headquarters to jail was a 26-year-old police officer who I'd done 2 ride-alongs with. And he and I were terribly emotional, and I was embarrassed beyond words, of course. And, it was just a sad situation. So off I go. I'm in jail. They had to isolate me because if word had gotten out who my boss was and all of that would not have ended well for anybody.
Yeah.
But I'm in there for 3 days. I get out, and you might think that this is where I'd hit rock bottom, but it really wasn't. Now it was close. But when I got out, I get home, and my mom picked me up, and my sister, they bring me to my wife and my son, and I now have a second home, I jokingly tell people, and that's Google. I got to see all the news stories that were done about me in the Atlanta media and social media posts on Facebook and other platforms about my arrest, and that was very humbling. I knew the gig. I knew my secret was out. I knew some people knew about it in politics, but not everybody. Now I knew anybody that would ever want to, hire me again or have anything to do with me would see what had happened. So I was resigned that, okay, you have this, the secret's up. Now what's going to happen to you? Well, of course, I'm facing a felony charge, and my lawyer says it'd be a really good idea to go check in. Just find some place, get 28 days. Let's just tell them that you're in treatment, and then we're going to get you to drug court, and that's going to be what happens to you. And I'm like, well, that's fine. So something happened along the way, and I don't know if I can say the name of the place, but I
you can.
found
Go
a
ahead.
place in that. Oh, good. Okay, good, because they're a great place, and they have a lot of good peers. But I found what we call MAR, MARR, Metro Atlanta Residency Recovery, but everybody in the business calls it MAR. They're 45, 46 years old, and minimum 90-day stay. So all of a sudden I've gone from, 28 days would be just fine to willingly going to a 90-day place. And the interim week or so where we were looking for the place to go, and I was on family house arrest, of course. I decided 28 days would not be enough for me. And if I was going to go do this stuff, I might as well at least give it a real chance. I still didn't know what a real chance meant, and you're about to see why. So, but I did decide, okay, the 90 days would be what I would need. So off we go to do the intake interview, and this is how out of it I still was, and how just ignorant I was. We meet with the young lady, and she does the interview. My wife and I are there, and she's making the assessment, and I'm sitting there listening, and at the end of it, she says, well, are there any questions you have for us? And I really wasn't joking without missing a beat. I said, yes. I'm interested in the program where I get my own apartment. How does that work? And she just laughed at me, and she said, there is no program like that. And I was like, well, that's what I want. And she said, well, it all is about community. That's the first time I was introduced to the phrase, it's all about community. And I didn't like it. I didn't buy into it. And now I want none of this, but I know I have to go. So at 50 years old, I'm checking in to a place to live in an apartment with some guys for 3 months at minimum. So that happened to me. And I will tell you that over those 3 months, I changed. It worked for me. The head of the men's program there is well known. He just got inducted to the Georgia Addiction Counselors Association Hall of Fame in the first ever class the other day. He's Doug Brush is his name, been around for forever. That man, he walked around for 2 weeks, and all he said to me is, you need to learn how to surrender. And I would say, what does that mean? He said, you'll figure it out. I never figured it out for about 55 days or so. But, they know how to deal with, they have a women's program and a men's program and professionals and non-professionals. I was in the professional program, but they really just broke me down, and they needed to break me down. And I was very arrogant. Here's how arrogant I was. In the 12-step tradition, I I had no problem with the concept of a higher power. My higher power is Jesus Christ. I've always kind of been a Christian, but I knew I didn't have a real relationship with my higher power. In fact, I had a manipulative relationship with my higher power, but I thought he hated my guts. I thought my own higher power hated my living guts, and I thought he hated my guts because, my sins were worse than your sins. What I did wrong was worse than you because, after all, I'm me.
Yeah.
Now, over 30 years, I convinced myself that I was a victim. And, if your higher power hates you, I didn't know the term higher power back in the day, but I mean, if Jesus hates you, well, what does it all matter? So I, of course, in all my ignorance and sharing all this to the counselors in all these meetings, and they're just letting me go on and on for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And finally, my primary counselor got me into the room. Oh, I should say with Pastor John at St. John United Methodist Church in Sandy Springs. He has a heart for guys in recovery, and he would come around and talk with guys in groups and hang out with you a little bit. And I asked if I meet with him, and they kept telling me, no, you're not ready to meet with the pastor one-on-one. It's not going to happen. And these guys are so arrogant, they won't let me meet with a pastor. I mean, come on, Yeah. They kept saying no. And I was getting mad and resentful and, what do these people know kind of thing. And so finally one day my primary counselor brings me into his office, and he just ripped me up one side and down the other and said, and by the way, my primary counselor is a guy in recovery, been in recovery for like 17 years, went to school, got all the credentials one needs to become a counselor. And he had a lot of credibility with me because he had been there, done that.
Yeah.
And so he just called me everything but a child of God and how arrogant I was. And he said, you're not a victim at all. You're just arrogant. And he said, don't they make little songs about Jesus that he loves even the little children? And in an adult way, don't they say he died on the cross for everybody's sins, but you think he didn't die for yours? And it just hit me like a 2x4.
Yeah.
And he just had me sputtering. And then he said, oh, by the way, now you're ready to go meet the pastor. Go talk to him. And the pastor sits down with me for like a couple of hours, and we just explore my higher power in the terms of higher power. And I learned how to have a relationship for the first time with the entity that I identify as my higher power. And that took like 4 or 5 meetings of 2 hours each. But after that amount of time, I allowed myself to then tag something else. Another counselor would tell us, and his name is Todd at Moore, and Todd would always tell us, you're a person of love worthy to be loved. Well, as 50-year-old man, that was all new to me. I never allowed myself I didn't know how to love others, much less myself. And something kind of all came together. And I was like, you know what? I am a person worthy of love. And it wasn't until I allowed my higher power and myself to have the proper kind of relationship based on the structures of recovery. I quit being so self-centered, and I allowed myself to let other people care about me. That's when recovery really clicked for me, and that was on or about day 70 of a 90-day program. And from there, it's just been, I feel like, second chances, rebirth, new beginning, whatever you want to call it. I do believe that I just surrendered. And, I got a sponsor. He's still my sponsor today. I meet with him all the time. I went from saying I want my own apartment to I must have 20 guys, my brothers from Mar and a few other places, but on my cell phone, and we text and we call every day. And it's just like a new world where all of a sudden I got all these brothers and I have these people that I care about, and I truly believe in the power of recovery. I don't believe it works until you're ready for it to work. Yeah. But when you're ready for it to work, I believe there's nothing more powerful than the hope and joy that comes with recovery. And my life the past 2.5 years has been, I will say this, I worked in government politics, and I've been the chief of staff to members of Congress, the deputy director of offices for the governor, and I've had a pretty high profile life in the realm of staffers in politics. I had a lot of amends to make. Yeah. I've had a lot of people along the way. And, I started making amends, and of course I was very nervous. And now I just love I love talking to people about my story and where I came from. And So it's interesting when you're in a treatment facility, and I think it's okay to say this because they're very public about it. But Delta Airlines, I think, is one of the best companies in America in terms of supporting their employees, especially pilots in recovery. They have a world-class program, and they're very proud of that program. And so I'm in a place with pilots and lawyers and teachers, and of course doctors are there, and all these boards that govern doctors. And so a lot of professionals, there is a pathway. There's a pathway with Delta and the FAA, and if you check off boxes, they'll let you fly again. Or if you're a doctor, if you do what the medical board says, you can practice again. And same with teachers. You got to do certain things, you can get your certificate back. Well, for people in politics, there is no board. There's no boxes to check. So I'm in this unique situation with, well, how am I going to provide for my family?
Yeah.
And my primary counselor kept saying, well, you need to slow down. And my wife supported that within reason, but the bills are mounting up and the debt's mounting up. And my son's in high school at this point and college is looming. And so we're like, well, but it took over 2 years. It took, frankly, about 2 years and 2 months. And I found a job, and as shameless plug, at the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse.
Nice.
Working as a policy and communications person, because I had made the choice during that 2-year time that I was going to be public about my recovery. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it would look like, but I knew I wanted to use the skills I had learned in politics to help advocate for what I believe deeply now. I used to deny it was a disease. Now I know it's a disease. I have it. It's chronic, progressive, deadly. It can kill me. And, I believe in that fervently and passionately, and that's me being the most it's a disease zealot in the whole world to now I'm probably there's no one that will advocate more than me that this is a disease and it needs to be treated as such, and it's an epidemic and it needs to be treated as such. And so about a year into my recovery, the head of my men's program said, I want you to reach out to the Georgia Council, and I did, and we didn't hear back from them. And this is still all about humility now. This is about humility and doing it on somebody else's timeline, letting other men and women help you, not doing it yourself. So, in the old days, I would have just said, well, forget those people. They clearly don't like me. But people kept saying, just be patient. And so at one point, though, it was like, you really need to start looking for, my counselors were like, okay, go look for other jobs. And so, okay, fine. So I reach out to a great guy, Chris Carr, who's the Attorney General of the state of Georgia. And General Carr says, hey, I want you to come meet me, and I'm going to this event. It's going to be at the Capitol. It's sponsored by the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. And I was like, oh, I know these people. I don't know them, but I know them.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to call and tell them you're going to be my guest. You just come show up. And I was like, okay, fine. So my goal at this point is to go meet him, not so much them. Yeah. But so I'm there, and I see the executive director. I can tell who she is because I used to do that type of stuff, and I knew she was the person. And I decided, and this was very different. I said, I'm going to go meet her. I'm just going to introduce myself. And again, this is taking everything I learned in recovery, and basically, sometimes I feel for people old enough to remember Seinfeld, I feel like George Costanza when he started doing everything different in that episode. Yep. So in the past, where I would have been arrogant, self-centered, and had a resentment against her, I just went up to her and said, I know you don't know who I am, but I'm Jeff Breedlove and Doug Brush. And she just stopped in her tracks and said, oh, yeah, he sent me an email about you. We should get together and talk. I was like, nice. That was a year ago, but great. And so we just sat there and talked for a few minutes. And she did have this big program. And I was like, I think you got to go. And she said, okay, come see me next week. And I said, okay, fine. So I go see her the next week at the appointed time, and we sit down and we talk. And she's like, all right, I'm interested in you, but it's going to take a long time. Are you willing to just take it slow? And I said, yes, ma'am, because, I've been unemployed for 2 years. What do I got to do? Yeah. So she said, come back. So she said, come back the next week. And I did. And I show up, and she sits down with me, and she says, okay, when can you start? And I was thinking, what's your definition of quick? Yeah. So, she had made the choice, and she blessed me, and she invited me on. And, it's just like, if you had asked me when I got arrested, would I ever feel like I'd get the kind of blessings that have come my way to professionally,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have scripted anything better. So professionally, it's all great. Now, personally, what's going on during that time? Well, there was a silver lining in the whole thing. My son, who we adopted, he's working on his Eagle Scout stuff. I get to spend more time with him. And my son is a kicker. He's a pretty, frankly, good high school kicker. He just graduated Friday. He'll be kicking at Rhodes College in the fall as their kicker. And
Nice.
the high school coach he's like, why don't you hang out? Because we don't really have a special teams coach. And so for 2 years, I'm on the sideline. I become a PTA person, because vice president, because the principal's like, you're going to get in this community. So I thought the school was going to like say, don't show back up on the property. I literally told them that. They're like, no, you're showing up. You're just going to start working, contributing, giving back to this community, because you don't do that. And so I got all this time with my son. Now we're losing money, but we're gaining memories, and we're gaining a lot of sobriety, and we're gaining a lot of strength. And so my wife is stuck by me. She's a real, we were best friends before we got married, and I don't know, if, what the future holds, because it's one day at a time, but we're together today. And my son and I are very close. And here's what's been interesting about him, because he is a kind of a good kicker.
Mm-hmm.
They did some stories on him. But of course, the media knew about my circumstance, and because that's what happens. And so there was this large profile of him in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, our big paper in Atlanta. And Steve Hummer is a legendary multi-award winner, sports writer of the year, kind of thing, real Atlanta legend guy. He called me one day and he said, Jeff, we want to do this story on Jack, but, I'm going to have to mention you in the story. Would that be okay? And I said, sure. We've been a family on this. And they came out with this story that is just, it's a full page, it was in the Sunday paper, and he wove it in there so wonderfully. And it's just been such a blessing, because my son and my wife and my mom and sister have embraced recovery and support me in my lifestyle. And that's a good segue to tell you, while I'm in MAR, my father died unexpectedly.
Yeah.
It was a heart attack kind of thing. And, I get word that staff pulls me out and says, this thing has happened. And it's funny, because my senior roommate at the time was a doctor, a cardiologist from Kentucky. And so they say, y'all have permission, go out to the hospital, and you need to get there as fast as you can. And we get out there, and my father's unconscious. Now, I tell you all that to tell you that I don't mind sharing this. There was a time in my life where my father and my relationship wasn't that close.
Yeah.
And it impacted me as a young person in high school. And when I was learning about life stories and incidents from childhood that can impact a person, I shared a lot about my relationship with my father. And my counselors were getting ready for me when I got out of treatment on a measured plan of how to repair my relationship with my father and learn to talk to him and learn to share feelings with him and all that. So while we're working on that, and I just told the life story to the guys and included those emotions about my father, he passes away right after that. And so my healing with my father came when he was on his literal deathbed, and I'm telling my side of that to him. And Mike, his first name's Mike, Dr. Mike is what we call him. Dr. Mike believes firmly or fervently too, that patients can hear in the state he was in. They did let Dr. Mike see the records once he showed him that he was a real doctor. He's like, I think your dad can hear you, and you should tell him your story. And they gave us the room, and everybody respected it. And I just had a private time with my dad, and that's how I said goodbye to him, except for one thing. So the funeral comes, and my wife, and I will give them credit when something like that happens. They make allowances for you to do what they think is healthy for your recovery. So we go out to we're at the visitation, and my wife brings me my suit, because you don't take a suit to treatment. Most people don't anyway.
No.
So my roommates are talking that night in the apartment, and I can tell they're clearly talking about me. And I finally, what's going on? And they're like, well, we're going to the funeral tomorrow. Yeah. We don't have suits. And I was like, oh. well, I do, and I have a mom, and I don't know, man. What do you know? And they're like, well, it's a thing. And so I have these guys telling me, support the brotherhood, and I have a mom who's, 80-something years old and just lost her husband of 50-plus years, and I'm thinking, how do I handle this? So here's how God handled that for me. My father chose to be buried in a Georgia Tech windbreaker with a big old GT right there and khakis. So I had a Georgia Tech sweatshirt and khakis. So I called my mom and said, you know what, Mom? I'm giving the eulogy, by the way. You know what, Mom? I think I'm going to wear what Dad wore. Would that be cool? I think it'd be kind of cool. And, she thought about it. She said, I think that'd be awesome. Now, if I had just shown up in that, she wouldn't have liked it. So I show up to the funeral, and most people at the funeral had been to the visitation, and most knew what was going on. But I was able to introduce in my remarks that, hey, my dad chose to be buried in something Georgia Tech, and I want to wear this in honor of him. And it just took a situation. It was uncomfortable for my brothers, and it made it positive for everybody. And all of that was different for me. All that caring about other people's feelings, learning to talk about them to others, learning to call my mom and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Instead of just having all the answers. And I tell all that to tell that's the power of recovery. And the real power of recovery is that I didn't leave.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had every excuse in the world to walk out on treatment.
Yeah.
Because after all, my dad had died, and you got to respect the victim. I'm the victim. I'm constantly the victim. And looking back on it, when I left, the thing I was most proud of that the counselors told me was, I wasn't the first person whose father or mother had died in treatment, of course.
Yeah.
But I was one of the few that stayed, and I was pretty proud of doing that for myself. I learned. I know now, I wouldn't have changed anything if I had left, except bad things. But they didn't need me there. They were perfectly fine without me. So my time in treatment was awesome for me. It wasn't awesome every day. It really wasn't awesome until about the last 15 days or so when I was really getting into it. And I go back 3 days a week. It is court mandated, but I do it. I do it with a joyful heart. Some of my brothers have been going there 6, 8, 9 years after being required, and I've made a commitment that I want to keep going. And I tell my story. We go down to the state capitol. We go to local governments. We go to Washington. I'll be up in Washington in June with Faces and Voices of Recovery, and I know a lot of people on Capitol Hill, and I think that what God put me here to do is I understand the language and the culture of government and politics at the federal, state, and local level. And I've worked in bipartisan jobs, and so I know, like in my state, in Georgia, I know I'm very close friends with Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp, the two people that ran for governor in our state. I was one of the few people that know them both very, very well. And I get along with people on both sides of the aisle. And, I believe deeply that we're going to make in Georgia, this is kind of a segue to what I do now, we're going to build a constituency of consequence. We model ourselves after if you think about what happened with AIDS in the 1980s or breast cancer with what's been going on, when those advocates show up, politicians and decision makers, they take them seriously and they treat them professionally. And our disease, we don't have that yet. I mean, we just don't. Yeah. And we're working with allies across the country, and we're the lead here in Georgia, and we are determined to, be a constituency of consequence. You can be for us or against us, but we're coming, and we're going to do a lot of educating, and we're going to tell people that these decision makers are for us or against us in government and business and the faith community and the civic community and the education community. Because the stigma, I think the most dangerous thing, more dangerous than any drug or alcohol, if you get down to it at the end of the day, is the stigma attached to it. I mean, for years, I would not go get treatment because of the stigma associated with it. And I see people today, now that I'm in this job and now that I talk to more and more people in a different capacity, over and over and over, it's the shame and the guilt, and there's a stigma, and it works both ways. The person in active addiction still is afraid of it from their perspective, and frankly, some of the ignorance out there. Now that I'm able to look at it from a different perspective, I mean, there's some mean, ignorant folk that need to be educated, and I've got no problem doing the educating. So it's just, I'm so excited. I'm just so excited with my life.
All right. Awesome story, man. We definitely have some questions for you.
Sure.
Were there? All right, I'll start. I didn't even ask Eric.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Thank you for my lead. Were there any like precipitating factors for you starting to use drugs and like continuing drug use?
Well, that's a great question. I think part of it stems back from that thing I alluded to with my father, with some of the emotional neglect. I mean, here's the thing, that it was just all emotional and psychological. I have to say that was part of it. But part of it was just my arrogance, too. I thought, I can just get away with this. Now, I think psychologically I wanted to escape from some of the pain, but I put myself in a situation where that drug was present, and I tried it. And I need to tell folks that may be listening to this, like they said in the Star Wars movie about the Force, it's true. All of it's true. You don't want to try it. Just trust me.
Yeah.
It's not healthy, and it's stronger than you, and you're not going to beat it. And it just took one try, and I never beat it as much as I wanted to until I was ready to get help, and then until I got help. And but I think if anything, it was just some of the stuff that went on with my dad and I.
Mm-hmm. All right, Eric, what you got?
I guess, okay, so my first question, kind of going back to, and I think you kind of have obviously come to this conclusion, but you were talking about kind of being a runner, as in, doing like binges. And,
right.
You had a higher profile job. You were able to maintain a certain lifestyle. And sometimes when you're able to do those sorts of things, I know myself, like I can fall into that kind of mold of where it's hard to kind of admit powerlessness and unmanageability when I'm able to pay for my mortgage or a car payment. I still have the lights on. I'm able to, acquire whatever I need to acquire. So how, I mean, getting arrested and going through all that, that's obviously one thing that's going to be a pretty big, eye-opener. But how were you able to overcome the powerlessness and the unmanageability and able to see, how that was active in your life?
That is a great question. I'll do my best to do it justice. And I'll start with some practical stuff and then move to some spiritual and emotional stuff. So before I got treatment, my wife put some conditions on me. And those were like, well, you can't have money and plastic and all that. And I hated it. I didn't like it. I was resentful. It caused fights. I was very ugly to her about it. And now, I admit that accountability is important to me in my personal journey of recovery. So now I embrace this. I don't carry cash per se. And when I do, I ask for it in advance, and we know what it's for specifically, and it's never a large amount. I do sometimes carry plastic, but there's limits on the plastic, literally. And I know they have the tracker on my iPhone now, and I know my son looks at it every day. When I'm out and about. When I go someplace, I send them a picture. I'll take a random, just a snapshot of the side of the building or whatever, and go, hey, I'm at work, or hey, I'm at that whatever event I told them I was going to. I used to feel very resentful about that. Now I feel like I get to do that. And here's another story. When I got my first little cold, first sign of the weather stuff, when I got out of treatment, and of course I'm still subject to random drug tests through the treatment center as part of my probation. Yeah. And I'm sitting in a Kroger, standing in a Kroger, and I'm at the counter, where all the medicine is. And at 51 years old at that point, I called the head of my men's program, and Doug answered, I said, Doug, I'm standing at Kroger. I need help and I need permission about what over-the-counter medicine is allowed for me to take. Now, if you had told me that I'd ask another man what over-the-counter medicine I'm allowed to take, I'd have thought you were on drugs. You'd have been nuts. I wanted to call Doug. I couldn't wait to call him. And I couldn't wait to say, how do I do this for my recovery, to not screw up legally, to not screw up, health-wise? Help me do what's right. Almost every Saturday, my sponsor and I, unless one of us is traveling, we sit down at Waffle House, just the two of us at god-awful time in the morning before we go to our treatment at MAR. Love Waffle House, y'all.
Oh,
and, and I sit there with another man, and he's like my mentor. He's like the real deal. I mean, I ask him things, and all week long I'll text him because he's kind of busy at work, so we do the texting thing because he can text in the meetings he's at. And, I'll text, what do you think about this? I'm feeling this. I need this. I'm worried about that. I mean, I feel like when I learned to surrender and put a different value on things was when I was able to be happy again. And spiritually and emotionally and psychologically, that's all true too. I mean, I used to never be satisfied with material stuff. I always like I'd get, whatever, the iPhone 6, but boy, I better get the iPhone 8. I mean, and I heard it's out there, so now it's like truly, I'm just happy with a discount shirt at the outlet store. And now I will say that my son's football career and Eagle Scout career, Boy Scouts and football are terribly expensive, and so is college. Even though he's going to a Division III school and he's getting a lot of money to go to the Division III school, it's still a good school and it still takes some money. And so I learned to reprioritize things, in other words, and I learned to reprioritize what makes me happy and what gives me satisfaction. And so I went from this very materialistic guy all of my adult life who literally measured things by the more I had, the better I was, to learning it's still nice to have some things, and that's healthy to have some things and to want some things, but you don't have to have everything.
Yeah. All right. I got one for you. I myself worked in a treatment facility before, and it was from all ages, from like 18-year-olds all up to like guys in their mid 50s, and like from what I saw and what I experienced, like the older guys had trouble because it's predominantly a young demographic in treatment centers. So the older guys and older females are sort of like the odd people out. So was there difficulty in trying to like humble yourself in treatment to relate to any like younger people that were there?
Oh, absolutely. Again, really good question. There certainly was. The first humbling one was when we were at MAR. I don't know the rules, they're all different everywhere. But at MAR, for the first 2 weeks, you're on what they call buddy, and you certainly cannot make a phone call.
Yeah, blackout.
And if you do it right. If you're doing it the right way, then you don't make the phone call. And I'm walking around the apartment just letting everybody know that I don't like that rule and it shouldn't apply to me. Now, if Dr. Mike was the senior roommate at the time, a guy named Alex was 20, I don't know, I think he was 24. And then we had another guy who was 25 or something. It was 24 and 25-year-old, and then two older guys. So that was our apartment. Finally, one of the two younger guys, Alex, just finally had enough, and he said, would you just shut the heck up? Didn't really say heck.
Yeah.
He said, has it ever occurred to you that the phone call ban isn't about you, that it's about them? Maybe they need a break from you for a little bit.
Wow.
Well, it had never occurred to me. Never crossed my mind. And I had to admit, this 20-year-old kid was right.
Yeah.
I'm like, darn, he was right. And I'm like, okay. And so that was the first of several things that I began to allow myself to learn from them. Now, they still could aggravate me with their music or TV shows. But the funny story of that is I did not like, and don't make fun of me, but it's a funny show now, but I did not like The Big Bang Theory whatsoever. And they did. And so they're like, well, you got to watch it because we watch with you. Oh, fine. Okay. So now I come home, and now my wife and son and I, we all watch The Big Bang Theory over and over and over again. One funny story was when I finally got in my car, and for people who don't understand, you think it's a blessing to get your car in treatment, but it's really not, because when you get your car in treatment, it's just more service work, and you gotta do more for others. And that was humbling too. But
then you're a chauffeur.
Mar has this. You're a chauffeur, and Mar wants you to learn how to do that kind of stuff. And so we have this lake that Mar owns, or they have a place on a lake, and
nice.
You go up once a week and do. Yeah, no, it's not. Alumni had donated this little spot, and so we go up there once a week. And so driving back one time. These other two guys who weren't in my community were in my car. The counselors said, do this. And so I did it. And these guys and I don't know each other very well. And so I'm driving. And so I have on Rush Limbaugh because, well, that's what I do.
Uh-huh.
And I have to tell you, one of them said, change it to the music. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to listen to what I want to listen to. And, you need to learn how to share too and all that. And this guy just proceeded to cuss me out all the way back home. And it really, really started to get to me. It was one of the first times that I was feeling real anger at somebody.
Mm-hmm. And
some of the other younger guys were trying to help me with it. And so there were definitely cultural differences.
Mm-hmm.
Look, some of those guys don't clean a lot. Let's put it that way.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah. And so I chose to humble myself and clean the apartment quite a bit because, well, I don't really like germs. So when I was there, I was very angry a lot at that concept. But when I look back on it, I think that it's one of the smartest things that they did was to put two older arrogant guys in with two younger arrogant guys.
Yeah.
And make us all coexist. I do believe that when we had our fights and then learned how to talk them through and get in touch with feelings and emotions and stuff after the fights is where I think recovery happens in a community. I do believe that. It happens in the car. It happens in the apartment much more than it happens in the classroom settings.
Yep.
So
agreed.
I didn't necessarily like it at the time, but I know looking back on it, it's what needed to happen. And I'll end by saying this on that particular question. So when I was out at the high school, and the coaches knew what had happened to me and everything, there was a couple of players that had issues, and the coaches would and they had my permission, they'd tell the parents, and a couple of parents would come to me and want to talk to me and want me to talk to their son. And because I had been with some younger guys, I was very comfortable, kind of, at least I had a window into their thought process, a window into what was important to them and what they care about. And if I had not had that opportunity at Mar to be with younger guys, I don't think I'd be as smart about recovery as I am today because they taught me so much. They taught me more than I ever taught them. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we each got one more question for you. I think I'll lead it off. Sorry, Eric. I'm going to steal this from you.
Go ahead. I have another question that you didn't even think of, so go ahead. Oh,
God. All right. So Eric and I both believe that, like,
Can you get it out there?
I can.
Are you doing okay?
Okay, Eric. We believe in individual recovery. Like, what works for somebody doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. And just like we heard from a previous speaker, there's many paths up the mountain. And so what my question is what is recovery to you?
That's a great question. And I just want to say that I believe that too. And that's the whole cornerstone of the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse is that we believe there's many pathways to recovery. Mm-hmm. And that's been extraordinary to me. I think the first thing for me was submission and humility, or in other words, surrender. I had to accept it was a disease. Yeah. It is a disease, and I had to admit I can't do it. Then it was accepting the brotherhood, accepting community, allowing other people, men and women, but mostly men, into my life. Recovery to me is continually, it's a daily thing for me to practice getting in touch with feelings and to learn how to respect my wife and sons and other people in my life's feelings and their needs. And I still struggle with it. I mean, it's not a light switch either. I mean, it's going to go on probably forever. But those are the key things. Learning how to care about others, letting other men care about me, and accepting that it's a disease that can kill me and that I'm not in charge, that there is a higher power. Those are the cornerstones, and how I practically do that every day. Mm-hmm. Practically speaking, the first thing I do every morning without fail is make my bed up. I never did that before. I do that now. I drop to my knees, I pray. Mm-hmm. And when I take the dog for a walk every night, that's also spiritual faith time for me, where I'm just reflecting on the day, saying a prayer, having a little private recovery time. So building recovery time into the day, texting my sponsor at least once a day, texting at least or calling at least one guy in recovery every day. Those are what the pathway looks like to me for recovery. And then most importantly, just I would just say remembering that recovery leads to better things than where I was before. Yep. The hope, that's the hope part of it. And Absolutely. Just believing in that hope is so key. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Cool. All right, Eric, finish her off.
So I guess, so being a public official and the role that you are currently occupying, I'm sure that you have a lot of people, and you spoke about this a little bit, not agreeing with, let's say, addiction's place in the spectrum of mental illness, where someone might say that addiction is a moral deficiency rather than an illness. What would you say to those people to let them, to kind of explain to them how this is a mental illness and that it requires treatment in order to be, to recover? What would you tell those people who don't believe that addiction is a disease?
Yeah. The first thing is I would tell them I'm Exhibit A. I used to feel that way. I used to live in hypocrisy, and I didn't believe it was a disease, and I thought it was a moral deficiency. So I can look them in the face and say, look, I am the living embodiment of the evidence that this is a disease, and it can kill you. I think that these elected officials and stakeholders in society that aren't there yet, they're witnessing hundreds of people die, close to 200 people die a day across the country. Yep. And, that's crazy. I don't want to argue with them. They can believe anything they want to believe, but what they cannot deny are the facts. And so the way I try to approach it is, look, I don't care what you think, but I do know that people in your constituency are dying. And we're going to go educate the community. And so it's really not about what the stakeholder thinks. It's about how we empower our community to speak up, people who do care. The more our community, here's the upside and downside of our disease. In Georgia alone, the state of Georgia believes there's close to 800,000 people in some stage of recovery. Well, just think about that for a minute. Think about how many family and friends they have.
Yep.
And so let's say only 200,000 of them would ever get in any way a contact with an organization like ours. They still have a lot of family and friends. And so when you get our community to go speak up and speak out professionally, respectfully, but yet firmly and without apology, we're going to get the public policies we need to save our lives. So I would suggest to you, I truly have decided it doesn't matter how they feel about us. It matters what they do for us. So I'm not trying to necessarily change their personal feelings. I'm trying to suggest to them that our constituency is millions strong. Yeah. And we're coming, and we're going to engage in society just like breast cancer survivors. My best friend, his wife just died of Lou Gehrig's disease, of ALS. I'll go to walks for that. Nobody shuns ALS folk, and as much as I love my dear friend Stephanie, who I got to spend time with because I was unemployed and I helped my buddy out, nobody ever doubts the legitimacy of that disease. And so I think it's not about what they think about us. The real question is what we think about them and what we think about ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we empower ourselves, when we speak up, when we lend our voice to an organization in our home state that's out there representing the recovery community, I'll tell you what, we are America. Our voice is the American voice, and there's nobody that can stop it once we decide to tell our stories. That's what I believe.
All right.
Love it.
That's awesome. That was a fantastic answer. All right. Well, we'd like to thank Jeff for joining us today. Let's give him a golf clap, Eric. You did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We'd like to give you a quick minute to give a word out to anybody out there who's listening, who's struggling, who needs to hear a message of hope real quick. What do you have to say to them?
Well, my message of hope is that at 50 years old, I got arrested, went to jail, and embraced recovery and started to surrender. And on a personal level, it worked for me, and it can work for you. And I don't care where you are in this country. We have a warm line at the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. It's 844-326-5400. It's staffed by your peers in recovery. These are trained recovery peers of yours that are there to listen, talk to you. You can text them, you can call them, and if you need a voice, we're there for you. And there are people that love you and care about you. You are not alone. We're on social media at the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. Reach out to us. If you're in Georgia, hook up with us, get to know us. But I would just say, embrace it, love yourself, and remember you're a person worthy of love and to be loved.
Perfect. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. So thanks for joining us once again, everybody listening out there. Keep listening, keep following us on Twitter, like us, subscribe us, share us, invite your friends. Keep tuning in, but most importantly, stay safe and stay clean.